Hello, and welcome to Pragmatic Product Chat podcast series, where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product management, product marketing, and other market and data-driven professionals with some of the best minds in the industry. I'm Rebecca Calageras for Pragmatic Institute and your host for this episode. Today, I am really excited. We are going to dive back into a topic that we've touched on a few times, and I know it's something that you've all delved into a lot in terms of AI, but really focusing on AI and the implications in product marketing. And who better to help us have this conversation? And I'm extremely excited to have here Anubhav Rao from who is in product marketing at Amazon. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about this today. So welcome, Anubhav.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca, for having me. Really excited to have this conversation. Been listening to your podcast and they've been super informative. So pretty excited to be here today.
Excellent. And having had the pleasure of talking to you beforehand when we were planning this, I know this one's going to be right as informative. So as you know, because you listen, I like to start with the origin story, right? Telling us a little bit about your background, how you got where you are today, and why you are so passionate about product marketing and AI and product marketing.
Absolutely. So born and raised in India, I've been in the United States since 2019. After I finished my undergrad in computer science, I kind of took a different career path because I was always fascinated by how stories and art have shaped or influenced society in general. I think they were influencing me while growing up. So I actually really wanted to be in the filmmaking space. But growing up in a middle-class family in India, my parents were like, nope, do you know anything about Bollywood? Have you ever tried it? There's no way this is happening. But thankfully back then, the content media space had just kind of started developing in India. So as soon as I finished my undergrad, I did a cold reach out to a bunch of founders in that space and joined this really amazing early stage startup back in India called Pocket Aces, where I kind of did everything and anything. But my main focus area was starting and scaling the marketing and business development team from scratch. And that's where my passion for distribution came into being, because the revenue model was creating our own content, organically distributing it, and increasing awareness and adoption, and then integrating brands within it. So did that for around 5 years. And after 5 years, I decided to do my MBA, for which I moved to Los Angeles, did it at USC, had an amazing time. And that's where the concept of product marketing, I kind of got exposed to it. And I realized a lot of what I was doing earlier was in the same zone. And product marketing as a role is something that's really important for distribution and differentiation. So I joined VMware right after my MBA, was there for 1 year in the cloud space. And then the opportunity with AWS happened, where for the last almost 2 years, I've been in the dev tools and GenAI space, helping kind of take these AWS services to go to market. Been a really interesting time, really excited about how this space is evolving and how it's going to help millions of people around the world.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we've all seen it. You know, you've had probably a longer view on Gen AI than a lot of us have. But even, in the last year, you just see how much has evolved and how much has changed. And we talk about how it affects so much, right? So many opportunities. But I think you have a really interesting take on how it affects product marketing in two very specific ways. And those are the ones I want to dig in, right? So you talk about both its sort of effect on the role of product marketing and its importance in an AI world, but also on how we execute that role in the AI world. So I think that'll be a great place to dig into.
Yeah, I think and again, this is all like a personal opinion theory, but one of my theories is that with artificial intelligence, the technical barrier is going to go down and the automation for every process in the world will increase. And that means people will be able to build products more easily and be able to scale them more easily. But that in itself will lead to a situation where the market would be cluttered with a lot of products. There'll be a solution for anything and everything. And when that happens, what really needs to happen for a company or product to be successful is how you're able to differentiate yourself and reach the right audience through the right channels. And I think in a nutshell, that's what product marketing is all about. I always give this retail analogy. If like product managers are supposed to put a product on the shelf, product marketing managers are supposed to take it off the shelf. So if you have kind of developed that expertise and have that experience of really understanding the value proposition and how to differentiate products and how to kind of talk to the audience, then you can really excel. And I think in the coming future, those skill sets will be really important. So on your first part, that's why I feel product marketing will be a very key role going forward for every kind of business. And I think on your second point, how that role will change, uh, I think it'll change in every respect out there. For example, on top of my mind, I think one thing is a lot of people struggle with this, a lot of operational and logistics work, where it's all about how do we find the right customer insights, how do we get the right feedback, uh, how do we automate or I guess increase the speed of changes on our go to market channels. And again, AI is good for building products, but it's also going to influence technologies that help you do that. One example, and again, this is just a very random examples, but I remember when I was at Pocket Aces back in India, we were doing something like it was a lot of guerrilla marketing because it was a early stage startup. We were basically sending out WhatsApps to our audience
Hmm.
uh, as a primary channel apart from Facebook and Instagram. So we would let people, our audience, know that if you're interested in getting our videos and articles on WhatsApp as well, because in India, a lot of people use WhatsApp and it's a black box because you don't get any data, insights, you don't know what's happening. But a lot of them share content through WhatsApp with their family and friends. So I kind of took this project and I'm like, we should reach to them there. I would manually add each number on WhatsApp, create a broadcast list. A broadcast list was only 256 people. So I'll have to create multiple broadcast lists, send content and messages, and to make sure it's engaging and personalized, reply to each message from like thousands of people. So with such a thing, it's obviously impossible to scale with previous technology. But with AI, you in the near future, you would be able to scale this engagement and these kind of guerrilla processes. And there are so many other ways through which the same thing will
Hmm.
happen, where you will be able to scale hyper personalization, get more insights about your customers, have a quicker feedback loop so that you can influence product roadmap. Um, so yeah, I think a lot of exciting things are coming in the space, which will really help us kind of excel in our role even more.
Well, and I think we you touched on a lot of stuff there that we can dig into, right? One is that with, and we've seen this, right? But with the Gen AI and AI have been around for a long time. ChatGPT sort of democratizes access to that, right? And when you think about the kind of things it unlocks, it also, as you said, it lowers the barrier that it requires to build a product. Now, that doesn't mean anybody can build anything, but it certainly changes the amount of investment in the same way that, like, AWS and cloud services did, because I didn't have to build my own, server room on site. All of this means that there can be a lot more entries in. And to your point, that means that your differentiation, and I think the other place that you talk about that's really, really important is the focus. And often something that, again, product marketing can help think about: how are we differentiated and where are we focusing? And that is going to be even more critical in the future than it is today.
Absolutely.
And the other thing you talk about is sort of distribution, right? Like, so you talked about all the manual work that you used to do, and we've all been striving for really, sort of very, very personalized experiences and very personalized communication, and there has always been barriers to that. But talk a little bit about how AI, you think, will continue to break down some of those barriers and enable different distribution channels and messages than we'd seen in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these technologies have already existed. We know Netflix, all these streaming sites have been doing it for a long time, where my homepage will be different from yours. Same for e-commerce sites. It depends on your browsing history. It depends on the things you have bought in the past. But if I look at the general industry, a lot of it is still untouched. Like a lot of our websites are still static. Everyone is getting the same content on the product description pages, um, even though your segments might be multiple. And just like tracking and engaging uh, your audience throughout their life cycle journey is a big challenge even now. Um, as product marketers, we focus so much on positioning and messaging and creating the right content. But the challenge always has been, how do you make sure that the content that you have personalized for specific segments reach out to those
Mm-hmm.
segments in the right part of their life cycle journey? And it's not just even external, even internally, when you're doing sales enablement and other I guess enablement efforts, it's always important to make sure, because again, for me, these positioning frameworks and messaging frameworks is content creation, while the other part is distribution, both externally and internally, to make sure you can see the effect of these assets that you're creating. And I think that's where AI is going to help a lot, uh, because with its technology, we would be able to better uh, personalize our websites, or even our email campaigns, and make sure that the messaging reaches out very specifically to the person who actually needs it at that certain point, instead of sending them something generic which just confuses them and makes them kind of drop out of that life cycle journey. And I know these technologies already exist, but I think in the near future there'll be a more democratic access across the world and across startups, SMBs, and enterprises for those technologies, and that will really help kind of even out the playing field, where then it'll really depend on your creativity and your basic superpowers as a product marketer of differentiating and really knowing your audience. So I think that should be really exciting for everyone.
It's a really good point, right? We talk about Netflix, right? And your homepage looks different, but also like the image they use to show to kind of promote the same movie is different for you and me, right? Could be focused on different things. So we've seen this for a long time, but it always, I think for a lot of us, felt out of reach at our company, right? And
Yeah.
so we can use AI both to create many different versions of our content, but also on the flip side, equally important, as you point out, is I can create all of those, but how do I also need to distribute them. I also need to get them in front of the right pair of eyes at the right time. And we can really use AI for both parts of that challenge. And I think we'll see more and more tools. We will not need the data science team that Netflix has had for a long time in order to unlock some of these opportunities. Not that.
Yeah. Even if you need, I feel we'll probably, because I think this has happened in the course of history, where calculators came and people were like, oh, you won't need maths, or you won't need this, or you won't need that. But then more use cases come into being.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the same case with AI. Like, to give you an example, so many more channels. And I think for this, I won't even say AI, but just the coming technology that's happening. Like, so many more channels will open up for marketers to try and access and reach out to, that you will always have work and coordination needed to kind of really excel. For example, you have your spatial computing now, you have your AR, VR glasses, and then there will come a point where you're like, okay, we have to reach out to the customers there as well. And that will require different challenges. So I feel the coordination will always be needed, but uh, it will help us not trouble other teams and vice versa for things that are outside of their core responsibilities too. And I think, again, something that has always happened, we have Figma right now, where it has kind of allowed product marketing people or product management people to at least play around with prototypes and
Mm-hmm.
designs, and just like make sure that you're not always dependent on the design team for even the tiniest of tasks, so they can focus actually on product design and like the core things. So just having that access to everything from data analytics, product design will really help kind of uh, put our vision into reality also, so that it's easier for others to understand and just coordinate better with cross-functional teams.
Yeah. I think there's also an important thing for us to talk about when we talk about using AI and and to your point, not just AI, but a lot of the other tools that we're getting in order to help us create content and distribute content. There is a flip side of that in making sure that we don't lose the trust of our buyers or the authenticity of our brand, right? Those are really, really important. That's like the other thing that we as product marketers are charged with and are responsible for, right? So there's an ethical aspect of this, a transparency aspect of how do I use these tools to help it be better, but without losing what we're fighting so hard for with those buyers' trust. So I'd love for you to touch a little bit on that.
Absolutely. I think that's probably the most important point that we'll have to keep in mind going forward. There's the aspect of transparency and making sure like people shouldn't feel it's a robotic, automated experience. You still need to have that human touch, and you really need to be transparent with your customers and your audience about how they are having that experience. Plus, just making sure that, I don't know, to give you an example, I think this recently happened. This was Air Canada, if I'm not mistaken, where they kind of had this chatbot for their customer support experience. And that chatbot was just giving out all sorts of policies to the customers, including refund and whatnot.
What a lovely
And I think
chatbot.
this was recently a court ruled saying that Air Canada will have to fulfill these, I guess, policies that the chatbot invented, because it was on their website, it was their product. They were the ones who kind of implemented it, talk to the audience. Audience doesn't care if it's a human or a bot. So there's two sides about being really transparent, but also thinking about the pitfalls and really making sure that whatever you're implementing, you are kind of covering all the possible scenarios, both with the product usage and the legal usage. I think, to give you an example, in the B2B space, when you are building the AI technology for developers, you have all these tools that have come out which are saying, oh, we now help you with code automation. We will just provide you the code you need. But as developers, you kind of want to know why that code suggestion happened. What was the logic or reason behind it? And that not only helps you decide if you want to accept or reject the suggestion, but it's also very important for future education, right? If you just white label everything and make it perfect, then the coming generation of developers won't have the same insights or education on making the right decisions. So you kind of like lose knowledge over generations. But the same logic can be applied to even B2C experiences, where if you are just putting everything behind a wall and automating responses to your audience, you lose that human touch and authenticity of your brand, which will actually probably be one of the key value propositions in that cluttered market in the future. So I think you raised a really excellent point. Authenticity would be the key value driver going forward, and people need to be really careful about how they think about that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of pieces. It's in the same way that if you use a tool to help generate code and you use that code and it inserts a bug, like you are responsible and accountable for that. You know that you need to check those things. And it's the same thing from the product marketing side, right? You need to check and make sure there aren't those pieces. But there's also the added, I don't know, I'm sure there are some people, but I don't know that most people, there is a different level of if a company is sending me an email, I know it's a company, but I also expect it to be something that company knows they sent me, right? And I expect to be able to tell a lot of things. Now, the reason I bring that up too is there's like, I see as I'm reading and researching that there are a lot of companies that come in different sort of spots on the spectrum, right? Where some companies today use AI to generate most of their content, and they hopefully have a team of people who review it, but it's heavily AI generated. And they don't mention that. There are other, particularly news organizations that have said, hey, if we're going to use it at all, we're going to put it right there. Like this was used with, or this was generated, using ChatGPT or whatever. Do you just, as a personal person, like as a person who does product marketing, where do you kind of fall on that spectrum of, look, everyone should probably just assume we used it to some extent, to like explicit acknowledgement anytime it's leveraged?
Yeah. First, just to get back on the how to use it part, I think my personal opinion is these are supposed to be our colleagues slash assistants slash helpers to kind of make sure that we focus on the creative and the differentiated aspect of our work, while the undifferentiated uh, work can be automated and scaled. So if you are using a chat GPT or these other tools to just create content from scratch and putting it out there, uh, it's not just a loss of trust with your audience. It's also not going to result in anything new,
Mm.
because how these technologies work is they're basically whatever they are creating right now or writing is based on whatever has been written before by humans. So if you're just like replicating the same thing and not using creativity and your own thought process, no new thoughts or words are coming out, right, for your brand. So you should be really using them as an assistant, or like maybe if you are very specific about ChatGPT and like content creation part, about how you kind of use as an editor for your sentence structure or paragraphs or grammar, and that's all fine. So that was the personal opinion on how they should be used.
I just go in real quick here, and I think you made a really good point where if whatever you're doing is part of your differentiation, that is not a
Yeah.
good time to lean heavily on it. So if your content in your organization, if content and thought leadership is part of your differentiation, leaning heavily into that to generate content, not to help, clean and refine, and we all have our grammar mistakes, then that's where you're not going to be able to do that long term, because there isn't the new content there. And it's the places where it's the undifferentiated, not filler, that's not fair to it. It still matters. Those are places where you can lean heavier into it. That's a great point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on the other part, I think it also depends on what your business model is, who you're reaching out to, but uh, that's a specific personalized call for each business about like, I don't think I have an answer on if you're writing a blog and it's maybe edited by some AI tool. Do you need to tell the audience that, hey, listen, I use the AI tools? I think you'll need that for academic purposes, for maybe a lot of actual research papers and maybe even some blogs. But I wouldn't have an answer on if those should be explicitly mentioned, especially if you're just using them as a supporting tool for editing. It's just like copy pasting everything. Um,
It's a tough
but
question, right?
yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't like call out my spell checker, even though I use it every time I write something. I would be like,
exactly.
this was done with the help of my spell checker.
We have
But
been
yeah.
using Grammarly for our docs and like our emails, and like each email tool now has like those short responses. So you're like, I said these 4 words, but these were automatically generated. So that's a slippery slope.
Yep.
But I think as a basic principle, it should always be about your like coming out with your own thoughts and your brand thoughts and being original and creative about it, or rather than just copy pasting anything or everything that you get out of it. And I'm sure some people will do it. If you have a small business that is SEO dependent and you kind of try and replicate SEO strategies of some successful competitors, and you can kind of use those insights to think about content generation. Like I'm sure uh, AI will play a very important part, and audience insights and competitor analysis, where you'll have a lot of uh, data about how your competitors have become successful, what your audience reacts to, and based on those insights, you can maybe generate a content strategy to scale at whatever scale you need it to be, in terms of, okay, I need to create content on these topics or these themes, and all of that AI can help you with. But I personally feel in the actual output of those content, you still need that human touch and authenticity of what your brand stands for.
Yeah. Again, if you want to differentiate it from your competitor and not just follow along. But that's interesting because you talked about competitor analysis and using AI for that. Help me understand, is that like it can monitor the topics that your competition is writing about and maybe their results, or how do you see that kind of working?
I think again, we already have these social media listening tools. We
That's
have
true.
these competitive SEO comparisons, keyword comparisons. But again, we do not have a democratic access around it. A lot of people don't know about these, or even if they know, it's maybe hard to navigate or understand. So all of that AI will probably help uh, improve. But the way I see it, you will be able to easily and actively listen to your audience online in terms of what their problems are, what are
Mm-hmm.
the kind of solutions uh, they are hoping to get, or where they are having a conversation. Like the internet is so vast, we have these open platforms like a Twitter or a YouTube or a Facebook, but then we have these closed communities on Slack and Discord and other places which are hard to kind of get into. So a lot of that access or data at one point hopefully will become easier to understand, just so that you can kind of truly understand your audience, what their problems are, and then build products that help them kind of solve those challenges. So that will happen. And then again, as product marketers, our job will be to make sure that we can understand those insights, translate it into a roadmap influence with the product teams, but then use those core insights to build our messaging and our positioning and our true unique value proposition.
Right. It's just like other more sets of ears out there listening that can help consolidate all that information that we all know is available today, but we don't have the time to kind of to dive through. The other place I think is interesting is sort of the reporting and data analysis piece. Again, it's an area where there's an enormous amount of data out there. And if anything, we struggle with making the data consumable and actionable, right? I may get the data point, but do I really know what it is? Have I thought about the implications? And that's another place, I think, particularly in marketing, where we are extraordinarily data heavy these days, that's a place that could really help turn those in. The question then will be, how do you do that without opening all of your own information to the world? But
No, I'm honestly really excited about it because data and its analysis is so important. You need, like, depending on where you are and the kind of support you have, it goes from understanding Excel to SQL to Python. But we're already seeing either like individual tools or the tools we work for have these AI features now, which can, if you want a chart from your normal data table, it can provide you that. It can, like, AI would really help us understand and extract valuable insights that we might not have been able to do in the past because of technological limitation, or I guess not being really fluent in that field.
mm-hmm.
But I think that barrier is gonna be removed, and it'll be really exciting to kind of really easily, not without any external support, be able to get those insights and kind of work. I guess using those insights to build our
Yeah.
uh, core assets.
Well, and it's often skill. It's also just time, right? Like data analysis, data cleanup, all those things, they just take time. And it's hard when we're doing all the other things to find time for that. And it's also really hard to get access to some of the data resources in the organization who could help. So the ability to sort of be self-sufficient in here, but not self-sufficient because I spent all night, with my trying to do, like all night, overnight, trying to get it to clean up, but because I have someone to help do that, I think is very powerful.
Absolutely.
All right. We talked about lots of different things today. If you were going to have listeners do 2 things differently tomorrow based on what we talked about today, what would that be?
I think the number one thing that comes to my mind, and this has happened because I've heard this so many times, we have all personally going through this. We talk about these technologies, but it's been maybe hard to kind of access them right now, just because a lot of companies take time to uh, make sure these are IT approved and security approved and can be used for their company data. I think everyone in the field is working on that and making sure that's not the case, but the adoption might still take time. My number one advice, because a lot of people really want to play with these technologies and see the potential opportunities or what they can do with it, I think my number one advice would be to maybe try these with side projects. Because if you're doing a side project, then you don't need any IT approval. You can still use these tools and play around and kind of like try and build something through it, uh, which will not really help you just like with that side project, but also help you with your work in the future, because you'll kind of have a head start and have a practical understanding of the possibilities with these technologies. Uh, And second, I think we have talked a lot about what's coming in the future, but I think the basics will remain the same. Like how much you understand your audience, how much you understand your product, how are you able to translate their challenges and your solution into one thing in terms of differentiation. So all of those remain the same. It's just that the technology will make it easier for you to kind of execute your work and like scale your work. So just be curious, learn, like try around different things, see what you like, what you don't like. And hopefully that helps everyone, not just now, but in the future as well.
That's a really good point, right? This is not ever going to replace your need to listen to your market and to go out and to talk to them in person, but it is going to help you execute on what you learn and scale it in a different way. So excellent advice, Anubhav, and a real pleasure to have you on today. I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I had a really good time.
Excellent. All right. That does it for today's episode, everyone. Thank you for listening. And don't forget to join us next week when we tackle another great topic designed to help you elevate your product, your company, and your career.